The only issue I have with that message is that we're in the 21st century. Sure, people have always lived through difficult times, but we've had hundreds and hundreds of years to fix things. And we have TikTok cut off the rest of this, but I think it was like, we shouldn't have to keep dealing with this shit, or we shouldn't have to be dealing with this now in these modern times, right? Yeah, I mean, I get it. I had a lot of people when I reposted this video to YouTube who had this exact same sentiment. They're like, yes, the Stoics aren't wrong. Throughout most of human history, people have lived through incredible times of conflict. Very few of us have got, the privilege of living through times of peace and stability, and that we need to focus on the areas over which we do have control. Where can we enact the most good? Where can we push back against the harm that these terrible people are doing? But the reality is that this is the human experience for most people throughout most of time, living in times of conflict and upheaval with men who are trying to oppress and do harm to other people. And again, so many people were like, yeah, but this is the 21st century. Like, this shouldn't be happening in 2025. We've been in a period where authoritarianism has been rising around the world for several years. It's just that it's been rising for several years in the United States. It's just that it didn't really hit home until November 2024, I think, for a lot of Americans. And then even then, I think it didn't hit home for a lot of Americans until the last couple of months, when they saw that Donald Trump was actually rolling out Project 2025, when they saw how bad it was going to be. They didn't believe the people earlier who clearly were, screaming from the rooftops or waving a flag and saying hey, red alert, red alert. They chose to believe it wasn't that bad, even though it was, and it was going to get worse. And it still will get worse if we don't stop it. But I guess I just wanted to speak to this misconception, erroneous belief that because we live in modern times, we are, evolved, more advanced people, that we shouldn't be going through these same cycles. We shouldn't be experiencing a time when authoritarians are, pulling their bullshit again. But that's just not how humanity works, right? We do experience these things in a cycle. And the kind of men who want to do these awful things, like that personality type, is still present in the population. And in fact, we could argue that there's actually an evolutionary advantage to being a narcissist, to being a tyrant. Like, there's been no reason, right? There's just no reason for that personality trait to just become extinguished within the human population. But I think it's even more than that. We continue to raise our children with a tremendous amount of trauma. We continue to brutalize our children. We continue to treat them as less than human. And that trauma comes back to bite all of us, right? We are creating, as a species, we continue through cycles of trauma, through the way we treat our children. We continue to create men. We continue to take children who may have some characteristics that may lend them more toward becoming men who act this way, and we traumatize the shit out of them, and we guarantee that we make monsters that are going to grow up to become tyrants. So why would it be different in 2025 if we still continued to treat our children this way? And I know Note Brigade has talked about this, and other experts on authoritarianism, other historians, have talked about how, your rights and your freedoms have to be renewed. We have this misconception that once you have earned rights and privileges, once, a people have fought for them, that they should be there forever, that they are now a permanent fixture in the society, in the culture. And that's simply not true. You have to renew your rights. You have to defend your rights. You have to make sure that the culture is continuing to reestablish, refresh their value and appreciation and devotion to the rights, right? If they no longer see a need for them, if they no longer are grateful for those rights, then they're no longer going to do the work of defending them. I made a video about Miley Biggs, who is MAGA Freedom Caucus Congressman Andy Biggs' daughter, and how she is running for office, but she doesn't think women should have the right to vote. She talks about repealing the 19th Amendment. She doesn't see the need for it, and she's completely oblivious to the way that all of the freedoms that she has are because feminists fought for those freedoms and rights for her. She takes them all for granted. She doesn't have an appropriate reverence for those rights. And she doesn't even understand how dramatically her life would change if they went away, while she is simultaneously fighting to take away those rights from other women. And that's what I mean. It's not one and done. with our rights and our freedoms. It's not one and done with democracy. It takes constant vigilance. We haven't really had that in American society. We've taken it for granted. I would say establishment Democrats have, but as a greater society, not only have we taken for granted how much work must be done, the kind of labor that must be done to renew, refresh, defend our rights, but also we've gotten very complacent about the ways that we need to protect our society from the rise of authoritarianism, from Christofascism, from, the Mormons who want to make their theocratic state, like Andy Biggs and his daughter who want to take away your right to vote. The work that must be done, the vigilance, the labor, the defense that must be done of our freedoms, we have not given that enough attention. So no, it's not one and done. Yeah, of course we're going through this in the 21st century because we took for granted the rights that our foremothers and forefathers fought for. We neglected the kind of caretaking that is required in order to maintain those rights because society is cyclical, right? So now we're in a position, we're down here again. We got to fight to reestablish those rights. And I know that doesn't feel good. We like to think that violent men were in the past. We like to think that the fascists were something that our grandparents and great grandparents had to fight. Not us. Not us. That's history. No, that's the human experience, right? Is continually having to go through these cycles. And that's why through most of human history, like, people have not known peace. People have not known periods where there wasn't struggle. But that's why I really appreciated that Stoic was like, that is something that we need to have some radical acceptance about, that even in the midst of living through a time like this, we are in solidarity with, we are having a shared human experience with most people throughout history, and that we've got to find a way to continue to enact the most good where we can. We've got to continue to be able to function, to dream for a better world, to work for a better world, even while we are going through this very difficult time. And we can't wait for things to be peaceful and easy. And we can't be subsumed by, despair and allow ourselves to become defeated, because we don't really have that luxury. God knows the most vulnerable people being targeted by this regime do not have the luxury of giving up, and they really need us to not give up. And I think that's what that gentleman was doing in his video about Stoicism, about like, you think you're the only one who's gone through this? Like, bitch, please. And also, while you are going through this, that doesn't mean that you are powerless, and it doesn't mean that you can't do anything to help other people. Like, you should be finding the ways in which you have an avenue to help people. You should be finding the ways where you can do good right where you are, where you can have an influence. Like, what is under your control? It may not be very much, but any areas where you have the ability to plug in and do good, you should be doing it right now, because that really, really matters. That was the message of his video. You can't use the like, nobody's ever gone through anything this hard before as an excuse to do nothing, as an excuse to give up. Most people in history have gone through way worse shit than what we're going through now, and they continued to push back through it. They continued to try and do good in the midst of it. And a lot of people didn't like that message. They wanted permission to be passive. They wanted permission to give up. And I think people really responded poorly to the message of, you're not so special, and people going through harder things than you have stepped up and met the moment and found their courage and pushed back. And it's not the life that you wanted or envisioned for yourself, but this is what you're going through right now. And you should be viewing this as an opportunity to find places to be courageous and to do good, rather than saying everything is terrible and therefore I have a right to give up. He was trying to put it in perspective, and people didn't take it well at all. And part of that perspective is understanding that these patterns in human history are cyclical, right? They are patterns. They do repeat. And part of the reason it's repeating now is because we did not do the due diligence of defending and renewing our rights and liberties as a society. We got complacent. So now we have to acknowledge that pattern, and then we have to acknowledge what we do to move to the next step, right? What is the way that we move the circle back up here to where democracy is reestablished, our rights are reasserted, and we now defend them, right? We had years of authoritarian creep and democratic decline around the world, and we kind of ignored it. So now this is where we are, and we got to fight to get back up here. That sucks, but that's the reality of the situation. So where do we have the ability to contribute to that fight?